Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Glen Gillespie, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, the Executive Director of the Ohio Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association. Welcome to the podcast, Glen.
Thanks, Hutch. Good to be here.
Let's have you start by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the nation where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, etc.
Well, I originally was born in West Virginia, but we moved to Circleville when I was 10. So Circleville is my home, which is just south of Columbus, Ohio. Circleville High School, graduated in 1973 and went to Ohio Northern University. Graduated there in 1977 with a bachelor's degree, which is now since became a, we've moved from a bachelor to a master's degree at Ashland University. So been a long journey that way. During my time in college, I was a lifeguard during the summer at a state park just south of Columbus, which ended up really being a good thing because I got retirement service from that when I did retire after 35 years in education. So
how does that work?
Well,
you were a state employee or what?
I was a state employee. So I earned about 1.67 years of service by being a lifeguard at a state park.
I like it. That's fascinating. Continue.
Went to played basketball, cross country, and track when I was in high school. When I went to Ohio Northern, I ran cross country and played basketball. I was on the team. I need to clarify. I was on the team. So just wanted you to know that. And I think that's what got me. I had a really good coach in Gail Doherty, who coached with Bob Knight at Army. And so he was an excellent coach and very defensive oriented, as you can imagine. And I think I got the bug from him when I stopped playing and ended up coming back and working summer camps at his camp. And I think that's really got the bug of coaching. And so I ended up hired out of college. I had a degree in business administration, so I taught business and got my first job as a JV basketball coach at Watkins Memorial, which is just east of Columbus. By the way, I need to warn all your viewers that we will go through a long litany of jobs that I have had. I'll explain why.
Okay.
But was a JV coach there for Richard Harrop, who is now back in Lamoni, Iowa. He came from Iowa. He was originally from Ohio. Was an excellent coach, taught me the little things about basketball and how important the little things are. I think you've heard coaches talk about the little things, and that's the thing that I got from him was all those little things. So I ended up then leaving to go to a head coaching job at Amanda Clear Creek, and was there for a few years, and then went to Jackson High School, where I was again a head coach for about 3 years. Moved to Marietta, Ohio, and I was an assistant coach, but I was the dean of students. And 2 years after that, I became the athletic director. So that's my first athletic director's job. I was there for 5 more years.
Let me interrupt you before you continue.
Go ahead.
So you first became an AD then in what year?
In 1990 is when I think I first became, 1990.
And remind me again which school you were teaching.
Yeah, that's where we're going to get to.
Yeah.
This will be interesting. but I was at Marietta High School on the river in Eastern Ohio.
Okay, perfect. Continue. Didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all right. It'll get foggier as it goes. So then I was there for 5 years as an AD. Went to a place called New London, a smaller school. I was there for 3 years as an AD. Then 1 year at Wilmington, Ohio, and then stayed there just 1 year, and then ended up with a job at Sylvania Southview, which is the western suburb of Toledo, Ohio, and finished my 13 years in education at Sylvania Southview.
And so you still live in that area?
And we're still in Sylvania.
Well, that's fascinating. So that's got to be, well, I've lost track. That's got to be at least 7 or 8 schools.
Yeah, well, and a few moves. And I guess when I did retire and I got the opportunity to go into the Hall of Fame here in Ohio, AD Hall of Fame here in Ohio, the question was which district would I, come from as the.
And so what did you choose?
Well, I was in the Northwest at the time, so that's where I spent most of my time in the Northwest. But we've traveled around the state. My wife, and she's been very good at picking up, and each move that we made was for the better, and each move our children handled it really well. We have a son and a daughter, and as my son says, he says I can walk into any place and make friends because I had to do that so many times moving with you. So it was a great situation. It allowed me to meet an awful lot of great people and be exposed to a lot of different ways of doing things. And so when I finally got into the last 13 in Southview, it was all those things that I acquired during those years of moving and being a basketball coach and stuff really stuck with me, and I think that was one of the reasons I finished my career here in Sylvania Southview.
Let me give a shout out to your lovely bride Twyla, because she's a saint for having that. I would think it would be tough for any bride to pack up and move that many times. Oh, particularly with the coaching and AD with the hours that you keep.
Well, and there was times where, and just going into this, I think it's real important for young ADs to understand that if they really want to get into us, they need to have their wife behind them, their wife or partner or whatever behind them, because the amount of time, from the time that you were there, the amount of time that you spend as an athletic administrator is enormous. And there were times where my wife would make dinner and bring the kids, and we would have either meals in my office together, or in some cases in a smaller school, we were eating food at the table that my wife was also collecting money for things, and people would walk in and look at us like, it was a nice spaghetti dinner, and we had bread and stuff, and it was better.
And the people are walking in saying, "Well, I see hot dogs and popcorn working. I get some of the spaghetti."
That's right. And those are little things that you have to understand. And my wife and how involved she's been in what we do and how she gets involved in things too. So I think that's real important. And she didn't work. She stayed with the kids as we grew up, and then once the kids got into school, then she started helping out. And originally, when I got the job in Marietta, I was the dean of students and the athletic director. So I had to do all discipline during the day. And she started coming in and volunteering into my office. They set up a place for her with a phone and a computer, and she basically was the athletic director during the day. So that really helped a lot. But then as we came to Southview, then she ended up getting a job at the central office, and she's very organized, and she just retired from that job after 21 years.
Excellent. That's great advice for new ADs and for all ADs, keeping your priorities straight. So let's go now to some of your mentors. I know you've already mentioned a couple of coaches, but I wanted to give you a chance to mention some of the mentors and people that had a great effect in your life, both coaching and in athletic administration?
Well, I think that one of the things that you go back to a high school coach that made a difference in you, and my track coach at Circleville, after he was also the phys ed teacher, he was the first one that looked at me and said, "Hey, Glenn, I think you could really help with some track," and that really gave me some confidence of doing things. So I would always talk about Jim Lent. And then I also in that time had a very good football coach who was also the AD. And so I learned a lot from his organization, and so I got that. But then my first job as an AD in Marietta, the AD across the river in Parkersburg was a guy by the name of Mike Hayden, who ended up, being a big time person in West Virginia athletics. And Mike is the one who got me involved, and he was that person that I could call and talk to, even though he was on the other side of the river. And he's the one who got me to be involved with the UIAAA. And he's also the one who talked me into going to my first NIAAA. And so I have to talk about him. I told you about my basketball coach that taught me the little things. And then I've also talked about, having Twyla around and having, all the background, and she learned so much. When I was first hired as a basketball coach, I didn't have a JV coach. So
Oh my.
Yeah. So Twyla went with me to scout. She did a great shot chart. I just want you to know that. And then she also watched my teams when I was coaching. So I had to do the JV game. She made sure that the varsity guys were sitting together. They came back in. And so, relying on her to do a lot of things. And, I need to mention her as much as possible because she's a great part of what I've been able to do.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Let's get to a more personal question. It's a tougher question. I like to ask people. They don't like to be asked this. The question is, what's your biggest failure or disappointment, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I think the first big disappointment was being cut from basketball when I was a junior in college. And, I played basketball forever since I was very little. And to finally get cut, I think that was one of the biggest disappointments that I ever had. But the thing I learned from it is, the sun came up the next day and everything moved along. And then, some of the jobs that I lost along the way were jobs where, I may have not been mature enough to handle certain situations, and they came back to haunt me. And so you learn from those situations, and you learn to get better each time. And you're going to fail as a basketball coach. You're going to lose games. There's only two types of coaches. Those that have been fired and those who are going to be fired. Well, it's almost the same as an athletic director, and even more so in this day and age. There's so much pressure put on that athletic director, and we went through the whole year of COVID and on all those things. So you're going to mess up. I screwed up some things, but here's the one thing, and I'll tell you this. I had it down for later, but when you screw up, you admit it. I screwed up. I apologize. I mean, you can't blame it on anybody else, because even if it was somebody else's fault, you have to take you're the head person. You're the person in charge, and you don't take steps to correct that, but you have to accept this responsibility for things that happen in your job.
That is a great answer, and I just want to echo that for those that are listening in today. The best coaches, the best ADs, the person that you have looked up all to your life, they have made mistakes, but the best ones own it. Just like you said, like if you mess up, you just own it. Own it, apologize, and move on, and try not to make it happen again. So that is some great advice. Let's delve into part of what one of your answers was just a moment ago about becoming an athletic director, and how has it changed? You started in 1990, and now it's 32 years later. You're still in athletic administration, although you're obviously over a state association, but you've been involved that long. Talk about what you've seen the differences are as being an AD in Marietta in 1990, and now as the executive director of the Ohio group.
Well, I think communication is the thing that's changed the most. and where we used to be talking on the phone all the time. And our kids used to kid me that they wanted to be ADs because the only thing that you do is you get to go to games free and you talk to people on the phone. So they told me that. So, hey. And I said, evidently I do a good job because you seem to get to your games all the time. So me talking on the phone is important. But I think that communication now has been replaced with text messages and emails. And you and I grew up talking to people and stuff, and I worry sometimes that we're losing that face-to-face thing. Even with Zoom, it's so much better than just talking to people on the phone. At least you can see them and see what's going on. But I think the phone calls that we used to make all the time to find officials, to find games, to find workers, all those things. I think those phone calls, unfortunately, have been replaced by a bunch of parents who are calling up complaining about something that happens. But remember, it's not about playing time. Just keep that in mind. It's never about playing time. I just want to talk to you, but it's not about playing time. And of course, it is always about playing time.
Yes, absolutely. That is, we're both chuckling, but obviously those in the profession, and that would be those who are listening to this, are chuckling at themselves also because they know that's true. Let's go back now.
There's
You mentioned,
one other
go
thing
ahead.
that I wanted to tell you is the word no. Evidently, that is no longer acceptable in the conversation, that we can't use the word no. I guess we have to figure out how we can change the no, because all the people want it into the yes. And so I think that we have to find different ways of saying no and getting that point across that it is no, but doing it in a nicer way that everybody feels good.
A nicer way. By that, you mean you don't want to say, what part of no don't you understand? You need to be a little bit better than that.
I don't think we can say that anymore, but we want to. Or the person that says, I pay your salary and you want to give them, a quarter and say, here's your money back because that's about all I'm getting from you. So, so we got to be careful with those types of things anymore.
No question. Great advice. Let's talk for a moment. You mentioned one of your coaches or one of your colleagues across the river originally got you involved in the UIAAA and then on to nationally. So I want you to talk about in more detail how you became involved in the Ohio Association. And of course, it's much, much bigger than the Utah Association just because there's many more high schools. But I think it's important for our listeners to understand the journey, why you became involved, how you got involved, and then how you took that step to become involved at the NIAAA, because I think that's an important story. Go ahead.
So we started going to the national back in the 90s, and I did set for my CAA in 1988 or 1998. So I got my CAA in 1998. And again, that you put those letters behind your name and that opens a few more doors for you. Then I was lucky enough to get it, and I was going to UIAAA meetings and the UIAAA in the Southwest. We have 6 districts in Ohio. So at that time I was in the Southeast, so I was going to the Southeast district meetings and stuff. But I was lucky enough to get on the publications committee. And back then, we didn't have a lot of people who wanted to be on the publications committee because it was one of the harder working committees there. You had to meet at the beginning of the national conference. You had to work that you had to do throughout the year of looking at articles or coming up with articles. And also then you had a summer meeting that you had to go to in Indianapolis. So those were things that you had to do. And there was people who would come into our meetings on a Friday, and we would be there from like 4 o'clock to 9 or 10 o'clock doing all the things that we had to do. Back then, we did, again, not a lot of computer stuff, but we were still doing it the old way. And people would leave it at the end of that meeting or during that meeting and not come back when they found out how much work that was going to be involved. So I was on the publications committee for 15 years. And that opened up an awful lot of doors to me. I got to meet some extraordinary people. And I know, you and I have been in those rooms where we sit down and all these ADs are talking and they're doing this and they're doing that. And you're just sitting there going, wow, wish I could do some of this stuff. But I mean,
Yeah.
and you've been around those people that we know, and some of those people have been presidents of organizations or on the board of directors of the NIAAA. Those are the people that I got to be around through those 15 years on the board. I also was starting to teach classes for the OIAAA, and eventually I got onto the national faculty of the OIAAA or the NIAAA. So I got to teach. I was started teaching 608, and then, well, actually it was 508 at the time, and it moved to 608, and then became the chair for 608. So I was the chair for 608. So I mean, all those things, you get to meet a lot of people that's involved in our organization, and then in 2012 when I retired, and yes, I retired, and I made my wife work for 10 more years. So actually, she didn't. I didn't make her. She enjoyed her job and worked for 10 more years. But I got appointed as the leadership training coordinator for OIAAA, and so I was on the state on our board of directors. I was a non-voting member, being the head of the leadership training, but also was the newsletter editor too, and I think I was the retired AD person too. So I did a lot of things. So all those things put me in a position to, when there was an opportunity to become the executive director, I had all the qualifications. By the way, after I retired, I think in 2020, I ended up getting my CMAA. And you were at meetings a lot where we talked about the CMAA and getting the CMAA and why don't I have the CMAA. And when I finally got it, it was an opportunity because I found something that I was very proud of and that I worked very hard at it. And that was during the summer of 2020, during the COVID, we ran our Summer Institute, which is a 3-day event. We teach 2 classes in the morning, 2 classes in the afternoon for 3 straight days. I ran the whole thing on Zoom.
Wow.
Set everything up, had all the classwork and everything. We did all that stuff, and got all the, I mean, I did it all. And at that time, Bruce had passed. So he and I had worked together to do the Summer Institutes, but he was gone at that time. So I did all that, and that really was an easy thing to do, and submitted it, and did the oral presentation for the CMAA. And so in 2020, I got my CMAA.
Let me ask you a follow-up. Did you like, we've been pushing, well, not really pushing, but explaining to our Utah people that the oral rather than the written for the CMAA is available. And we've had, I think, since Jamie Sheets, who may have been the first one that took the oral, but I think most of our Utah people have gone that way and seem to like it. So talk about, at least from your point of view, the advantage of the oral, not that one is better than the other, but some people are better at the oral and some at written. So talk to that for a moment.
Well, and I think that was one of the things that you and I were around when it was the only way you could do it was a written evaluation. And I kept hammering them through our leadership training institute meetings in September that they needed to have another way. Well, the other way was oral. Some people think I like to talk, so I thought that might be a good way. But one of the things that you do within the oral is you take some of your information that you have and go through a slide presentation of that. And you don't have to have a lot of slides because you're going to talk about what each slide is. So I think I had 10 or 12 slides, and they were basically, this is what it looked like. It was like, here's the listing of all the people that took the courses and how many classes. Here's a listing of my teachers and all the people that were involved. Here's the final things that I sent to the NIAAA. So I mean, all those things, you don't have to go into great detail. Some people will, but I think I took like 25 minutes for my oral of just talking through the slides and explaining what each one of them was and how we set up the Institute. And I think we had like 120 class seats in those 3 days. So it worked out really well. And it was something that, again, I was passionate about at the time. And that's what I think ADs that are looking for that CMAA certification have to find out something that they're passionate about. And it could be something simple. It could be a leadership training thing that you did, or organizing your captains of all your teams and having meetings with those and writing all that up and explaining how that worked through maybe a year of work. So it's, you could have set up a track meet or something. You could have run a regional or just all the things that you did within that to set it up at your place. So there's a lot of things out there that you can do as an athletic director to get that CMAA, but it's got to be something that you're passionate about.
Right. Thank you for sharing that, Glenn. For our listeners, those thinking about taking that step from CAA to CMAA, consider the oral if it fits into who you are and what you like, or go with the written if it fits you better. Because as I said before, one is not better than the other. You've really talked about my next question, which was your contributions to professional development. You've mentioned so many. Did you want to say anything else about that before we go to the next question?
Well, I think that it's become a passion of mine in professional development. And as an executive director, both of us have to really try to push our membership to become active, to take classes. And the classes are there for you to survive in your job. They're also good for continuing educational units. I mean, we do that a lot in Ohio. We tell them to go into their we call it the IPDIP here, and go to their professional development within their school system and get all these courses approved. Because, and and I know, we had that our flyer through the NIAAA that we talk about the certification of all those things. But I think the real thing that we need to push on is the courses are going to help you to stay in your job. And I think that you and I, as executive directors, are trying to push that across to our state's educational department, in that, and to our superintendents and principals, that these are courses that are going to make your AD better, but they're also going to keep them in that position, because we all know it's about 30% now of ADs, changing jobs after that first year and getting out of it. And so we're constantly trying to have,
sometimes after the first month.
Well, and that's happened. There's people that have gotten jobs when they walked into the office after, I'll go be the AD, and they walk into the office and there's a legal pad with nothing on it sitting on the desk, and there it is, go get it. So, we're trying to do things through our education, through our leadership training, to keep ADs in their job and to provide them with some effective things that they can do to survive.
Well said. Let me, I have to share this story from Utah. It's at a school that shall remain nameless, an AD that shall remain nameless. This school district thought that it was better for this school. They didn't need an AD, and they would replace him with an assistant principal, or in this case, it was 4 different people, with one of them being responsible. This was a while ago in Utah, and the vice principal, part of the AD, lasted 3 weeks, mid-September, gone, out of a job. Needless to say, a year later, the AD was back in place and was back being the AD. So, I mean, you and I laugh, but that absolutely does happen.
We all have those stories, and that's the other thing about being a part of the NIAAA that I think people don't understand, is that when we go to our national conference, whatever our problem here is in Ohio, there's a person in Utah, there's a person in Florida, there's a person in the state of Washington that is having the exact same problem. But there's different ways to handle those problems, and you just want to get that. And I think that's the thing that the NIAAA that I love about is the people that I've gotten to meet all over the United States. And Hutch, you and I, we've got lots of friends, lots of places. And we can go to almost any state, call somebody and say, hey, what's good? What can we do? Or, hey,
Absolutely.
we're coming to your house. Check with your wife and see if we can stay for a couple of days.
And that is so true. And so thank you for pointing that out. It talks, and I mentioned this so many times on the Connection podcast, that UIAAA family, and I know they're the Ohio State.
Thanks, Hutch.
Yeah, when he says thank, what he means is thanks to the University of Utah for taking USC out. But this is actually going to play after those series of championship bowl games. So we don't know who's going to win. Obviously, in this corner, we're pulling for Ohio State, particularly over Georgia. But I know everyone else is just going, now you two old guys, stop that and get on to something that's important. But it's that connections that you have outside that make the NIAAA family, the OIAAA family, the UIAAA family so important. Let me shift gears and talk for a moment about the National Executive Directors Council. Talk about your involvement, how you became to be executive director in Ohio, because like I said before, Ohio's a big state. So,
well, and our first executive director was Bruce Brown, who's well known all over the country. And Bruce really did a great job of drawing up our Constitution, of doing all the things that we need to do, and getting our organization back on track. We were in trouble when Bruce took over as the executive director, and the fact that our membership was failing, or the amount of money that we had available for us to do things was failing. And since he took over in 2012, our membership and everything took off. And so I was in a position that when he passed, that I was in a position to have, a CMAA and all this time on the board. They were giving me an opportunity to be the athletic or the executive director. And so I got that opportunity, and I'm starting year 3 of being executive director in Ohio. And because of that, I get to be a part of what's called the NEDC, which is the National Executive Directors Conference, or council, as you said. And again, that is a place for executive directors throughout the United States to come together to talk about things that are important as an executive director in your state association, and what you need to do, or ideas, just like anything else. We exchange ideas. We call each other when we need to know who does your newsletter. So I call and say, who does your newsletter? Because, you could have, it could be somebody in Utah and they could be great. And I can just send everything to them electronically and have a newsletter there. Or people who are wanting to be partners with your state. I can find out things about them that maybe I can't, because it's just here in Ohio. But I can call you in Utah, or I can call Roy Turner in North Carolina, or a lot of different people. To Karen in Michigan, I can call them and talk to them about what they do and how they do things. And it's just like anything else. It's just like your conference, or your league that you're in with your ADs. We're on a national level that we can exchange ideas.
And then networking. Let me just I always have to throw something in at the end, but this talk about networking, I think it's just so important, particularly for our younger ADs out there. Once you establish that networking in your state, and then you begin to go to the national conference. And in our case, we're lucky enough to be on the NEDC because there's only one person from each state. But the amount of networking that you can do and how it will help you in your job is just incredible. So thank you so much for sharing that. So let me ask you somewhat of a personal question, and it's a tougher question. I compare it to Gene Barstow, who you and I know who that is because he replaced Wooden at UCLA. But I consider Bruce, Bruce was, he was absolutely incredible. And so I want you to share with our audience what it's like, because that's, I can see maybe I'd want to be the guy that takes your place, but I'm not sure I want to be the guy that takes Bruce's place. So just talk about that on a personal level, because I know it all opened up great opportunities that you've talked about, but that's got to be really a tough personal thing, because I know you were very close friends.
Well, I think the one thing about Bruce is that, he was one of those servant leaders that we talked about. So he put people into places that they would do the right things for him. And of course, Bruce tried to do everything. And as you know, he was on every committee on the national. He was coaches education. I mean, Bruce did everything.
He was the ever ready bunny. I know that. Continue.
Oh, yeah. Well, I found out that from his daughters that Bruce was the epitome of the 10-minute nap. Bruce could take a 10-minute nap and he was ready to go. Because I said, when does he sleep? Because there were times that Bruce would send out emails that, during the night or something to people, and so but Bruce was one of those types of people that was just you can't replace a Bruce Brown. But what you try to do as the next executive director is you try to put people into roles of doing some of the things that Bruce did, because I can't do all the things that Bruce did. So I found people who could do parts of what Bruce did and this part of what Bruce did and that. And I've been very, very lucky to find people here in Ohio that have made my job a lot easier, that take some of those things off my plate, that do some of those things for me. And I think that the success that we're having right now with our membership growing and stuff is not because of me, or maybe it's because of me because I put people in positions and then got out of the way and let them work. And they have been phenomenal for Ohio, and we're growing in our membership, and because of those people that we put into places. So whatever you do, if you have to follow a Bruce Brown, don't try to be Bruce Brown, but he left us a blueprint of what to do, and so we're following that. And I guess basically what I'm doing is following what Bruce put down on paper and trying not to screw it up.
And then also, might I add, make sure you get somebody like Julie to be your assistant, because as you and I both know, she does all the work.
Well, remember, I said I put people in positions to do some of the things that Bruce did, and so having Julie, having some of trying to get our younger ADs involved, and finding those younger ADs that want to get involved, and they're out there, but you got to find them, and you got to give them a responsibility and get out of their way and let them do it, and then just like everything else, you look at the things that they've done well, and you make sure you compliment them on those things, because that's what you have to have. You have to have people around you that are willing to work for you and willing to work for the organization.
Well said. Give us your observations, Glenn, about the recent conference in Nashville, the recent national conference. It was one past Denver when I say that, because Denver was such a huggy affair because we'd had the virtual in Tampa, but now we're a year removed from that. So just share your observations about Nashville.
Well, Nashville's a whole different animal, because you're in the Opryland Hotel, which is just huge.
Huge.
It's huge. So I don't think, there's people that I missed that I didn't see for some reason because of just how big the place was. There's also the allure of downtown.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that I guess there's a street downtown where there's a lot of music and people and stuff. I wouldn't know about that because I'm engrossed in the conference. But no, again, another great conference by the NIAAA. A lot of feedback from people that were there. We had 78 from Ohio that went, and it's in driving distance or a close flying distance for people. So we had 78 people that were there, and their recollection, they're coming back, and a lot of them were new. This is the first time they've ever been to a national conference, and I saw a couple of them, and their eyes are big. They're just like, they cannot believe what they're doing, and they're going, I just don't know which breakout session to go to, and there's so many of them. We taught over 50 classes. I mean, it's staggering the things that we can do at our national conference. And, I look forward to it every year, and Nashville was no disappointment, other than the fact that I know there were people that I usually see every time and I didn't get to see them. But if I can tell you, and I tell this all the time to people in Ohio, if you get an opportunity, you've got to go at least once to understand what this whole organization is about. And it will blow your mind.
Once it gets into your blood, it changes things.
Well,
and they normally go back.
This is the largest conference that we've ever had in terms of numbers. And that's just amazing. And the fact that, and I don't know if you've ever, but have you taught any classes where you had to teach with people from other countries?
We had 2 internationals in our 790 class. And so that this time it just, I'd called on the one guy because he's from, I think it was South Africa. And I just wanted to hear his accent because it was so cool.
Well, I taught a class back when I was still on 608. I taught one of the webinars, but this was without a picture. It was just sound. But, I had a person from South America. I had a person from Canada. I had somebody from the Far East. That just blows you away in the fact that we're gathering in people from all over the world who want to come and learn what our organization is all about.
Yeah. Let's finish up with a couple of questions, Glenn. The first being, you've got 2 suggestions for a brand new AD, and they need to follow these suggestions in order to be successful. What would your 2 suggestions be?
I think number one is you need to get involved in whatever local association. As I said, in Ohio, we have 6 districts. So in Ohio, we encourage our ADs to get involved with their districts. If that's just going to the meetings right now, that's one thing. And but if it's, you can become a part of that, become within the organization of that district. So you want to get involved in that. And I guess that comes from, being involved in just your conferences, understanding what goes on in your conference and making those meetings. I think you just kind of go from conference to the UIAAA organization and starting in the grassroots part of it. And then the other thing is take courses. You've got to take some leadership courses. And there's opportunities to take them online now. Especially the basic courses, the 500 courses are all online if you want to take them at your leisure. Or there's the NIAAA is constantly having webinars now, 3 times a year that they're putting out. Take some of the courses through there, but the courses are going to relate to what your job is. And there's almost a course out there for any situation that you have, and we keep adding more courses as we talked about. Maybe there's too many courses, but that's not for us to worry about. But our only worry is to try to find somebody to teach the course on a state level.
Absolutely.
That's our worry as the leadership training coordinator, executive director. That's our big. But get involved, and then find those 1 or 2 ADs that you can pick up the phone and call, because you're going to have days. You're going to have some bad days, and I remember the coaching thing that, the coach talked about the top 10 people in his life, and the dog was in front of his wife because the dog understood. He just sat there and, as long as you pet the dog was fine. So the dog understood you're having a tough day. He just sat there and talked to you. So, but you need those people in your life to talk to, that understand what's going on. And maybe it is your wife who's involved and can help you with that. I know in my case it was. But there was also people in our league or a conference or something that we could pick up the phone and say, what the heck is this? And what should I do about it? I know when I got here to Southview, we had hockey. It's the first time I've ever had hockey. And so, we go through the fall season and we're into the winter, and I pick up the phone and call the AD who's was a long-time AD at Northview. And I said, tell me about hockey. He goes, I've been waiting for you to call. Let me tell you what you do with hockey.
Oh, that's great. Glenn, what questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask?
I don't think so. I think you know me, I'm going to talk. You're just trying to figure out when to step in and ask me another question to get me off the subject. So, no, I think that what we all want is for our ADs in our state to become great ADs and to do things in their school. And this is what I try to tell our ADs in Ohio. You know, your job is not to get scholarships for all of your athletes. That's not your job. There's plenty of people out there that can do that. And, you know, your job is to provide opportunities for the kids in your school to participate. That's your job. And if you can do that, if you can provide those opportunities and make sure that they're good opportunities, and that means there's all those things that go into that. But if you can provide opportunities for kids in your school to participate and enjoy themselves, that's you've done your job. That's it. It's that simple. Yeah, no, but think about that every time.
Very well said. On that note, that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our guest today has been Glen Gillespie, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, the Executive Director of the Ohio Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association. Thanks so much for being on the show, Glen.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.